You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
So the 12th chapter of the Mishnah of Yevamot actually deals with halitza rather than with yibum. I suppose you could say until now we've been dealing with yibum, with levirate marriage. Although we've been mentioning halitza, the process for not doing yibum. We've been dealing with yibum mainly, and we've been defining the parameters of marriage. But now in the 12th chapter, we are going to get into the process of halitza. In other words, the process of refusing yibum. And whereas until now, by the way, the focus has been almost entirely on the man, we've been looking at this through the male gaze. It's interesting that the process here is actually run by the woman, not by the man. And in order to understand the Mishnah and the concerns of the Mishnah, we need just to go back to the Pesukim. We need to go back to the verses. We've looked at these verses at the beginning of the tractate, but it's worth revisiting them now because the verses will describe the process for chalitza, and the Mishnah is going to elaborate. And it begins with a scenario. This is now, of course, this is going to be man-centered. If a man doesn't want to take his brother's widow, so I guess the underlying assumption of the Torah here is that the widow wants to be married, and he's refusing. But she's now going to release him. So his brother's widow is going to go up to the elders in the gate. This is going to be a public process, and it's going to be to the elders, hazkenim. We'll see there's a question about the bet din as we learn the Mishnah. My husband's brother, my brother-in-law refuses to do this. And the elders of the town, we come back to the elders of the town, and we see this, by the way, in the story of Boaz and Ruth. Boaz goes and he finds the elders of the town, and he actually summons there a bet din. He summons a bet din, and he gets people to sit with him there. The Mishnah is not going to learn out from Boaz because it wants to learn out from the Torah, but we see a hint of that in the story of Boaz and Ruth. So his brother's widow goes up to him in the presence of the elders. This is the third time we've mentioned that the elders are present. And she pulls the sandal off his foot or off his leg. So that's the first thing she needs to do. She pulls off his sandal. And she spits in his face. We won't see it in this Mishnah, but the rabbis actually learn out that she doesn't have to spit at him. She kind of spits in front of him. So that sort of the most degrading part of that ceremony is taken away by the rabbis. Ve'anata ve'amra, and then she makes a declaration. This is what shall be done to a man who won't build up his brother's house. And Venikra Shmo B'Yisrael Beit Chalutz Hanal, and he shall be called in Israel by the name, the family of the unsandaled one. So there's something critical about this sandal and about the bit din. And the Mishnah now in the beginning of chapter 12 will start to play around with these ideas, start to examine these ideas. Mitzvat Chalitza Bishlosha Dayanim. The command of Chalitza is in front of 3 judges. We need 3. We need a bet din. Afilu shloshtam hediot. Even if they're all 3 are laymen. So it doesn't require an expert bet din. 3 ordinary people could do it. And this is actually what Boaz does. He just goes to the gate and he gets the elders to sit around him. They can be laymen, but 3 ordinary people can make up a bet din. Halitza v'manal. She performs the halitza with a shoe. Chalitzata kshera. her halitza is valid. But Ampelia halitza psula, if she performs it with a felt sock, an Ampelia is some kind of shoe that's not made out of leather. Halitza psula, it's invalid. Somehow she has to do this with a leather shoe. We'll see the Rambam, we'll come back to this. The sandal sheyesh lo arkev, with a sandal that's got a heel on it. Kasher. V'she'ein lo arkev pasul. The sandal's got to have a heel. Somehow it's got to sit around the whole of his foot. If not, it's invalid. Min ha'arkuva ulamatan chalitzata kshera. From the knee down, she's got the sandal's got to be strapped up around his foot. In other words, below the knee. Chalitzata kshera. The chalitza is valid. Min ha'arkuva ulamalan chalitzata psula. From the knee and above, it's invalid. So we seem to be talking about somehow the mechanics of this shoe, the way it's strapped on, the way it's built. It needs to be a leather sandal that covers his foot, even to the heel, and it needs to be strapped onto the bottom of his foot. If she performed the chalitza with a sandal that didn't belong to him. Remember that Pesukim said, let's go back to the Pesukim. V'chaltza na'alo, she shall pull literally his sandal. Me'al raglo, she pulls his sandal off his foot. So the Mishnah is going to say, well, what if it's not his sandal? Chaltza b'sandal she'eino shelo. Over sandal sheletz. Or vi small. Or Visheli small biyamin. Maybe she pulled off his left shoe that was on his right foot. Chalitzata kshera. It's still a good chalitza. We don't seem to be anxious about these kind of boundaries. Chaltza b'gadol shehu yachol halech bo. She performs the chalitza with a sandal, but that's too big. But it can't be massively too big. It's too big, but he can still walk in it. Or bekaton shehu chofe et rov raglo, or one which is too small, but it still covers most of his foot. Chalitzata kshera. It's a good chalitza. So there are limits, but broadly we're generous on the size of the shoe. Chaltzava laila. Chalitza psula. If she performed it at night, her chalitza is invalid. A bet din, well, there's an interesting question here. So generally a bet din that is judging a monetary issue can start during the day and can conclude at night. But if it's judging another issue, it has to sit only in the day. So when the Mishnah is saying, if she does it at night, the chalitza is invalid. We seem to be saying this is not just a monetary matter. This is not just a financial matter. This is something more significant than a financial matter. It has to be done during the day. The Rabbi Eliezer machshir, and Rabbi Eliezer allows it. By the way, this is the opposite way round from most printed Mishnayot, but we're covering the Kaufman. Well, I'm following Kaufman. The Kaufman manuscript has it this way around. But you should know it's the other way around in most manuscripts. Uva small chalitza psula, with the left shoe, her chalitza is invalid. Rabbi Eliezer machshir, but Rabbi Eliezer permits. Somehow, this opinion this opinion in the Mishnah seems to contradict what we've had up earlier, saying, look, on the left foot, it's okay. The left shoe on the right foot is okay. Maybe this means on the left foot, actually. But I put this in square brackets for you because this last comment is actually not in Kaufman at all, although it is in the printed text. And the Rambam is going to just comment here. And we get a sense, actually, from the Rambam. A wooden sandal. We can use a wooden sandal. That's what the Mishnah says, on the basis that it's covered in leather. I mean, it's interesting. When the Torah talks about na'al, when the Torah talks about a shoe, the Torah is really talking about a leather shoe. The Mishnah has explicitly said it can't be a felt shoe. It's got to be a leather shoe. And even the wooden shoe, well, the Rambam is saying, no. It's not any old wooden shoe. It's a wooden clog maybe, but it's covered with leather. This is all just kind of after the fact. In principle, in other words, before the fact, you don't permit it. We need a leather shoe. There's something about leather which the rabbis seem to think is enormously important. And then, ve'ein halacha ketanakama ba'amro halitza v'layla halitza takshera. That we don't go with the first opinion in the Mishnah saying halitza at night is valid. We can't do halitza at night. Velo Rabbi Eliezer bihiyot machshir bismol. And we don't go with Rabbi Eliezer, who permits with the left foot. So in fact, saying halitza at night, the Rambam agrees with the text of the Mishnah we've got, which is that halitza at night is invalid, even though the text of the Mishnah he's got is different. He has to actually contradict the Mishnah. So maybe our Mishnah text reflects the Rambam, and it's hard to see. We've said already that the text of the Kaufman manuscript in this whole tractate seems to be a bit ragged, a bit unclear. So whether the text was altered to follow the Rambam or vice versa, we're not quite sure.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.